Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Lauren Turner Dunn. In the last few months, society has witnessed a number of natural disasters, from hurricanes and floods to earthquakes and fires. In the past 20 years, 600,000 people worldwide died in natural disasters. Hurricane Harvey caused about $30 billion in damage, and almost 400 people were killed in the earthquake in Mexico. In 1994, a 6.7 earthquake hit Northridge and killed 57 people. Earthquake experts say a big one is on its way to shake LA, and everyone needs to be prepared. On Point spoke to some CSUN students, and many of them say they are prepared for a natural disaster, but others are not so sure.
It's time for us to prepare, and I think after all the current situations, we're going to start doing all the preparation already.
Well, my brother's in the military, so he has MREs all over the place, and we have supplies that we would need.
Well, I guess I have the basics. I'm always stocked in water because, we always drink water. But, I don't have a first aid kit or stuff like that,
We need to be prepared for this because I feel like most of us here on campus, we talk about being prepared, but we're not really prepared. We don't talk to our families about this could happen to us.
So I do have kits in my house and in my car. I live in Topanga Canyon, so in the case that there is an earthquake, my family and I are already ready to get down.
I also feel that we need to prepare as much as possible, start gathering canned food and water.
In all honesty, I probably am not prepared personally.
We should be expecting an earthquake pretty soon. After all this stuff that's going on, I feel like California is going to have something coming.
In any case, Californians have to help each other when the big one comes. Neighbors perform an average of 70% of all rescues in major disasters, but there are preparations people can make, and there are first responders such as the Red Cross and emergency management teams who will provide relief services. On Point's Catherine Molina has more on the story.
Thank you. Now joining us we have Guillermo Sanchez. He's a preparedness manager at the Red Cross Los Angeles region. And then we have Lisa Curtis, CSUN emergency manager. I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
I'm going to start off with Lisa. My first question for you would be, what's the protocol when a disaster happens?
So here on campus, if we have a significant event, a major disaster, perhaps like an earthquake, campus leadership, emergency personnel will communicate with one another. If it's significant enough, we will activate our emergency operations plan, which will open up our emergency operations center. So people who've been identified to support the efforts of response and recovery on the campus will come together, and we will work with assisting agencies from that point for command purposes, for strategic plan implementation, and those would be the initial stages of response in a disaster.
And how many agencies would you say would be involved in a disaster?
A significant disaster, such as a major earthquake, it's kind of an all-hands-on-deck situation. So if the incident requires resources beyond those of the university, we will definitely be supported by assisting agencies from fire, from police departments, as well as other departments like Public Works, Department of Public Health. So a variety and many, and depending on the scale of it, if it commands resources across the region and across the state, we could see resources coming in from multiple jurisdictions and multiple levels of government.
What kind of programs or resources do you provide for students here at CSUN?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. We actually have an emergency operations desk reference that is available to students. It's also available to faculty and staff. And our President Harrison, referenced it in September, the value of it. It will provide our students with information that they can do to be cognizant of the potential dangers on campus, and that, pertains to things such as hazardous material incidents that could happen, or an earthquake or fire. And what we can do as students, as faculty and staff, to prepare a family plan, an individual plan, as well as an emergency preparedness kit.
Okay, perfect. You just mentioned a family plan. I'm going to bring you into this question. How important do you think it is to have a family plan for any type of disaster?
Sure. It's key, I think. It's probably one of the most important pieces of being prepared. A lot of folks, when they think about being prepared, think about having an emergency kit. food, water, first aid kit, radio, things like that, but they don't really think about the importance of having a plan with your family. When I talk to individuals about preparedness, I always ask them, in an emergency, what's the first thing you're going to think about? Where's your emergency kit, or where's your family? Most people are going to say, where's my family, right? So you want to have a plan with your family to be able to reunite, communicate with each other. Having an out-of-state contact, for example, is a perfect first thing that any family should have as part of their family plan.
And you, Lisa?
No, I agree completely with what Eve said, and to add on to that, practicing that plan is something that's critical. Emergency contact numbers could change. The people that you might want to be able to reach out of state is important to let them know that they are part of your family communication plan. And if you have people in your family that may need additional support, so it could be grandparents, it could be somebody who has a disability, it could be children, how they communicate and how they manage this needs to be brought into that plan. Let them be aware of it. I am a big advocate of supporting the children and making sure that they have emergency wallet cards that help them understand where they need to be in the event of emergency and who they can contact.
Thank you, guys. Guillermo, I'm going to ask you a question. You are with the Red Cross. What are the first steps taken in the Red Cross to provide services to those who are affected?
Sure. So in an event of a major disaster, earthquake, fire, whatever that may be, we're going to work with our local partners in the city, government, city of LA, county of LA, and work with them and see where they would need us to, open up shelters. The Red Cross's prime role in a disaster is providing mass care, which means providing shelters and feeding to those who've been evacuated, who've been affected by the disaster. So we work with our partners to let them know where we're going to be establishing our shelters, and so that way they can let the folks affected by the event know where we're going to be at for sheltering and feeding resources. Okay.
And what services do you have available that come along with the Red Cross? You said shelters, and what other things do you guys offer?
So on a regular basis, we always offer free disaster preparedness presentations in the community. So my department and the volunteers I work with, we go into the community to talk about the importance of having a kid, making a plan. We have presentations for adults, seniors, and children. We also do our first aid CPR training that we offer in the community. And so I would encourage anyone who's interested in being prepared, go to redcross.org and, sign up for a first aid class. That's something very basic skill that, and a very important skill that you should have in case if there's ever a major disaster.
Okay, and I would say for the both of you, how long do you think after an event like this happens, how long do you guys help those who are affected? Do you guys continue for several months?
As long as it's needed.
As long as it's needed?
It's really going to depend on the scale and magnitude of a disaster. So in emergency management, in the field of disasters, all disasters begin and end locally. So for someone such as myself, for Guillermo, who works here for LA County area, our availability and our presence is something that begins when the disaster begins and goes months and possibly even into years for recovery purposes.
So people who, this goes for the both of you again, people who aren't affected by a disaster, they often want to help. What would you guys say would be the best way to help victims who are affected by any disaster?
So I think from the Red Cross perspective, after, and we're seeing it right now with hurricanes, we are always looking for financial support, to do our work. We as a Red Cross already have the food, the shelters, the cots for those being affected. But for us, that's the best way to be able to help those is, donate to your local Red Cross, but then also on that side, volunteer with your local Red Cross because, we need people to be able to support these operations. Here locally, for example, with events going on in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico, we've sent over 200 volunteers to be able to help out. But yes, those opportunities are there that come up right now for hurricanes, but locally, like Lisa said, there are opportunities here locally where they can volunteer and support us on a regular basis to help us do what we do.
And you, Lisa?
For disaster response purposes, I think one of the greatest things that a community member can do is, if they're really interested in being a force multiplier, if you will, in response to a disaster, is, like you mentioned earlier, getting trained on the first aid, the CPR, the AED, having those skill sets, participating in your local community emergency response team. Cal State Northridge has a CERT team here, and it's where we train our citizens to understand the basics of search and rescue and basic medical triage and things that they can do in the initial response phases of a disaster to be that extra hand that our first responders will need during a significant event. First responder resources, they're going to be extremely overwhelmed, and this is going to extend far beyond the university and the local area. So when the community can come out and support one another through an organized method and also support the organization of convergent volunteers, which often happens during times of disaster, it really helps people get back on their feet, measure the amount of resources that we can utilize, prioritize with them, and it helps advance recovery.
My next question would be for you, Lisa. So we talk about the importance of having an emergency kit.
Yes.
What would you say are like some of the things that would go in a kit, and where would be the best place to keep it in a house or in a car?
Well, there are multiple kits that you can keep actually, and that I would recommend. You definitely want a household kit that you can have available and accessible, and everybody, again, this is part of that family emergency plan. Everyone, even down to your children, need to be able to utilize it and access it. It needs to include storable food, prescription medicine, regular medicine, first aid materials. You want to make sure you have the resources you need for your pets as well. Something people often forget are just the basic necessities of sanitation. So you want to make sure that you have baby wipes are wonderful. Water may not be as abundant as we would like it to be. Hygiene products for both men and women as necessary, and children if you need extra diapers and things of that nature. And then you want a smaller scale version in your vehicle or in your workplace so that if you need to be home or away from home for a couple of days, you have resources available to you. And something that is really important for your emergency kit is to keep it current. So check the batteries that go with your flashlights, make sure that the medicines are not expired, make sure any food that you have in there is not perishable. And again, with the emergency contact information, I highly recommend keep a laminated sheet inside all of your emergency kits that have a record of your names and contact information, and make sure it's current.
And my final question would be for the both of you guys. Do you think we could ever be too prepared?
I think the answer is really no. I mean, the more preparedness, the better. You know, I've always told individuals, you know, when you get prepared, there is no way to predict what's going to happen, but you want to have as many resources available to you so that when that does happen, you're not as impacted as severely if you weren't unprepared. So you know, definitely don't go to the extreme, but definitely, you know, have your kit, your plan, and you know what to do during an earthquake or fire to be better prepared, so that way it doesn't impact you as much as it could if you were unprepared.
Now, I echo what Guillermo has said, and I think it's very crucial for us as individuals as well as a community here that the more we can each prepare, the better we are going to be able to face something that's going to be a significant event, both on campus or at home. And every little bit that you do contributes to your ability to respond with a better sense of mind and a calmer presence during a disaster.
And if I could add something, you know, people think preparedness is complicated. It's not. You know, take simple steps. You know, for like Lisa mentioned, you know, and I mentioned, having an asset contact. You know, find that person today. You know, go gather some food at home and just make a quick kit at home. You know, take small steps and you'll get there eventually.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here and joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've come up with a family emergency plan.
Great. What is it?
It's difficult to talk about, so I'm not telling you.
How will we know what to do?
You won't.
I'm so glad I won't have to remember anything.
And me too. Thanks for this, sweetie.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
It's a beautiful day out here. Sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors. Come on, that's it. Let's go.
Red shirt, blue shirt, yellow shirt. Oops. Yellow pants, red pants, green pants. Oops.
After a natural disaster, people can feel the effects for a lifetime. Back to you, Catherine, with more on the story.
Thank you. Now joining us, we have Lori Meono. She's a staff psychologist at the University Counseling Services. And we also have Jennifer Vargas Pemberton, a psychologist assistant professor in the Marriage and Family Therapy program. All right, I'm going to start off with our first question. It's going to be directed towards Lori. What kind of emotional impacts do disasters have on individuals?
I think there's a wide range of emotions that people can experience in response to a disaster. I think numbness is one that's really common, denial, as well as like sadness, a sense of hopelessness, even anger. People don't exactly always experience just one. Sometimes they experience multiple emotions, and they can kind of fluctuate back and forth between a variety of different emotions.
Okay, and do you think that people should seek counseling after something like this happens? Can I get an answer from the both of you?
I mean, I think that counseling can be helpful. I think what's most important is that people do reach out to their support systems, whether that's friends, family, coworkers, whoever helps them feel safe, secure, because that's one, I think, very common response is that people sort of lose a sense of safety. Anxiety, panic can be really common, so having support can be really helpful. If people are noticing that, what they're experiencing seems to be longer than might be comfortable, or if they seem to be chronic, then yes, I would definitely recommend reaching out to a counselor. Sometimes having someone who is there who's unbiased can feel a little bit safer for some people, so I think it absolutely can be helpful to reach out to a counselor.
And what about you, Jennifer? What do you think?
I think it depends on how severe the symptoms are. If somebody's directly witnessing and experiencing the event, it could be more extremely traumatic, and they can have more PTSD symptoms like flashbacks, intrusive memories, maybe having difficulty attending, concentrating, nightmares. So if you're seeing something like that, whether it's children or adolescents or adults, then it would be a good idea to think about getting counseling and reaching out for professional help. Yeah.
Okay, and my next question would be for you, Jennifer. It would be, how do you think parents can help children understand and cope with these sort of events that happen?
There's a lot of ways parents can help and families can help kids and adolescents because the nature of disasters, they're so unpredictable and people feel out of control and powerless. Their sense of safety is really kind of rocked and challenged. That's where parents can help to create a safe space for their kids to really talk about what's happening. Sometimes there's the feeling of let's not talk about it because it might make it worse, and actually the opposite is what happens. The more you allow kids and adolescents and families to talk about how they're feeling and what they're thinking and what their worries are, it's actually more helpful. And then the other piece is because they're not feeling safe, helping reassure in an honest way. So not saying, oh, this will never happen, because obviously you don't know if we'll have an earthquake or not, but reassuring, saying, you know, we'll do what we can to protect you and to keep you safe, coming up with ways that maybe, even though things feel out of control, that we can have control over, like preparing for if something were to happen, what can we do now to get ourselves prepared? And talking about emergency kits and safety plans, that's really helping. And then also just really coping, having the family and the kids and teenagers really think about what ways do they cope when they're feeling really anxious or really sad or angry. What are things that they could do? And it could be simple things like deep breathing, mindfulness. You could do great things online that are helpful that way. Journaling, drawing, things like that are helpful. And the other piece, I think, is really being mindful of how much kids and the families are being overwhelmed and bombarded by too much television that's really showing graphically what's happening, and too much exposure to internet and computers that can be re-triggering and re-traumatizing. So being careful about that.
How do you help people make sense of what happened? Like, have you helped people in situations like these, families, children?
You know, it's really going where the family's at and asking what are they thinking, what thoughts do they have, helping them talk about why they think this has happened. Because sometimes, especially young kids, will have fantasies about this is because I did something wrong, when really it's not anything personal. So allowing that opportunity to have that conversation and talk about maybe myths that somebody might have about their involvement or personal participation in it.
And then for Lori, in your experience, if you have any experience, do you think that disasters bring out the best or the worst in people, and why?
I think it can be a little bit of both, because there isn't any sort of like standard formula to how people respond to disasters. And I think that can sometimes complicate things, because I think a lot of people sort of do experience a sense of hopelessness, this sort of why me, why did this happen? And it can, you know, elicit a lot of anger, sadness, this sort of, well, you know, what's the point? That can bring out a lot of negativity, a lot of recklessness even, because, you know, people can think, well, you know, if this is beyond my control, why should I even try? Why should I do this or that? But on the other hand, I think it's also entirely possible, and it does happen, that you see a lot of humanity, you know, a lot of people reaching out, wanting to help each other, you know, watching out for each other's safety, for their security, people helping total strangers. It's pretty amazing. So I think you do get a little bit of both.
How do you think others support other people, or like, have you seen, or what do you think about people helping other people in these kind of incidents or these events?
I think that's another way of having a sense of control over something that is out of everyone's control. Anything you can do to be supportive of one another. You see with the recent incident in Las Vegas, where the community was really coming out and giving blood and donating and coming together for the earthquakes and the hurricanes and giving, it really gives us a sense of we can be part of the healing and part of the restoration, and that's, I think, really strengthens us and moves us forward.
I think the first thing that comes to mind, and, you know, maybe just being from the area, you know, and I think about the Northridge earthquake that we had back in the 90s, I remember that very clearly. I lived 15 minutes from the epicenter at the time. And even as a kid, I remember seeing pictures, hearing stories of people pulling out others out of the wreckage, for example. You know, you see this with car accidents, people pulling people out, using jaws of life and whatnot, which sure maybe is some people's jobs, but a lot of times, I mean, Jennifer brings up the Vegas incident, you know, you hear these stories of people shielding others. So I do think people take certain steps to try to protect those around them and help out in any way that they can. And what I find really interesting is that people have different ways of responding to traumatic situations. So while some people respond kind of emotionally, you hear about this sort of fight, flight, or freeze, and some people do freeze. And meanwhile, other people respond more kind of by taking a problem-solving approach. So instead of dealing with all that, it's how can I help? What can I do? So it's really beautiful to see the way that people come together.
Do you think we can ever be too prepared for any kind of disasters that would, that could occur? You guys are both open to answer the question. Jennifer, I can start with you.
I mentioned it's a good way of preparing because it's a way of getting a sense of control over something that's uncontrollable and out of not predictable. So it's helpful to get as prepared as possible, involving the family and the kids in putting together a safety plan, emergency kits, fire, first aid kits, and there's a lot of checklists online that families can use in terms of getting prepared, and it really does help people feel a sense of I'm doing something and reassurance if something were to happen. I'm at least a little prepared. Batteries and flashlights and food and water, things like that.
Yeah.
I like the fact that Jennifer has used the word unpredictable because I think there's a big difference between preparation versus prediction, and we can't predict disasters. We can't predict earthquakes or fires or anything like that breaks out. But that doesn't mean you can't take steps to prepare. So yes, safety plans, having kits in place. As far as being too prepared, I think the only time really that you kind of get into that territory, and this is unfortunately a common response to traumatic situations, is avoidance, and kind of sort of become this hermit and taking safety to such an extent that it interferes with your functioning. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it does become concerning. It might be excessive. But short of that, I think it is a great idea to be prepared.
All right, thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching On Point. For more information on disaster preparedness, you can visit CSUN's Emergency Management and Preparedness website or the redcross.org. You can also follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30, and you can watch us on Santa Clarita Valley Television on Sundays at 5 and on LA 36 at 8:30 Friday mornings. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Lauren Turner Dunn.